Happy New Year and welcome back to another episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. This is Bill D'Alessandro, and this episode you have all four of your hosts, me and Mills and Michael and Heather, and we are doing another Axial deal. It is a $4 million chain of trampoline parks. If there's one thing you take away from this episode, is that Heather has an absolute killer pun about halfway through. So it's a really cool business. It's growing. It's 25% EBITDA margins. Definitely financeable, good one for a family office or a large researcher. I hope you enjoy this episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. This episode of Acquisitions Anonymous is sponsored by Acquisition Lab. Acquisition Lab and their team, they've been longtime supporters of the pod, and they provide a really great service for people who are looking to acquire a business. So it's created by Walker Diebel, who's become a friend, the author of Buy Then Build, How to Outsmart the Startup Game. So Acquisition Lab's an accelerator with a highly vetted cohort-based educational and support community for people who are serious about buying a business. So a lot of our listeners like you tune in every week to our deal reviews. You want to get in on buying a business. You're on this podcast because you're trying to learn how to buy a business. But if you're not quite sure where to start, Acquisition Lab is a great place to start. So they exist to help people buy a business and to navigate all those complexities of the process, everything you hear us talking about on the show. They provide a proven framework, tools, and resources that support you all the way from search to close. They do it. There's a whole bunch of educational material and support. So if you're serious about buying a business, check out acquisitionlab.com, or you can actually email the program director, Chelsea Wood, directly. Her email is chelsea@buythenbuild.com. All right. We have got all four hosts on this beautiful first week in January, 2024 Acquisitions Anonymous. Let's go.
Our condolences.
Congrats. I was going to say starting off with a bang.
Guys. Yeah.
So did you guys have good New Year's? Did you guys go anywhere? I mean, Michael, you had an explosive New Year's, right? Like tons of fireworks sold.
Yeah, it was a good season. So the weather really cooperated. So Sometimes you eat the bear, sometimes the bear eats you, and we ate the bear this year, so it was pretty good. Not going to complain.
I saw this video on the internet that I do not think was shared by you, but it was like an aerial pan of the city of San Antonio.
I saw that.
And
that was amazing.
It looked like almost it was being bombed, but like there were so many fireworks going off. It was like panning across the whole city. It was like you personally drove around to every home in San Antonio and handed them like a ton of fireworks. I was shocked.
Bill, when you watched that video, did you hear a cash register ringing in your ear? That's exactly what I was thinking when I saw it. I was just like, cha-ching, 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 Michael.
Our creditors watch that and they hear their money getting paid back. It's the thing to do here in San Antonio, and there's other places that are like it around the world. I saw another video in Tokyo, which was kind of similar, but there the video was cooler. It looked the same thing, but instead of like just freeways and fireworks behind the freeways, it was right next to Haneda Airport in Tokyo. Like it was cool. Like just like you see these 747s and 777s taking off, and it's like in the background. So kudos to people to get out and celebrate. I think it's a good thing.
You kind of have to though.
I have an economic interest in that, and totally cool.
It's like Bill saying you should treat your dog well.
Treat your dogs well. Kudos to all those people.
Look, I don't like dogs either. I mean, it's fine. The dogs don't like fireworks. I'm a cat guy.
Yeah, this is incompatible. The dogs hate the fireworks. Yeah.
That's good. I don't like the dogs either. So
no, don't worry. No, Michael, we are not at odds. In fact, you are also my best friend because we do sell a lot of calming supplements at New Year's Eve and 4th of July. We have whole marketing pushes around 4th of July. The fireworks are coming. Chill your dog out.
I got you.
Are we supposed to do a deal today?
Oh, yeah.
What's this podcast about?
Wait a minute. Is this a podcast? All right. Who's reading it? It's a good one. It's another Axial one today. Who's got it?
I've got it. I'm going to read. Yeah, it's from Axial. It is a 4 million EBITDA network of indoor family entertainment and recreation centers. The company owns and operates a network of 4 established indoor family fun entertainment and recreation complexes strategically located in the Midwest. Managed by a centralized team, each complex strategically positioned is positioned near bustling suburban neighborhoods outside major metropolitan areas. enjoying a stellar reputation in their respective local markets. With recent extensive facility and attraction renovations, the business is positioned for robust growth and enhanced profitability. Strategic locations. Situated in a busy suburban neighborhood, each complex benefits from proximity to major metropolitan areas. I already said that, and a solid customer base. Premium entertainment offerings distinguished itself in the market. The centers boast diverse array of attractions, including laser tag, trampolines, go-karts, arcades, climbing walls, rope courses, and more, ensuring a unique and engaging experience for visitors. Operational excellence under the current ownership, they have streamlined costs and operations at each location, resulting in high profit margins and efficient operations. Proven growth strategies. The ownership team has meticulously developed an infrastructure and growth plan, positioning the company for organic expansion and increased market share. So they list the attractions again, which I already went through, and to kind of repeat the rest of it, I think, again, in investment consideration. So if you could scroll down, let's see, maybe you did already. I'm on a different page here. Sorry. I'll scroll down. So revenue, 21 to 23, 13.1, 13.9, and 15.7 million in revenue. So they grew a lot in 23. Year over year growth, that was 6.1% in 22 and 12.9% in 23. EBITDA was 3.6, and 4 million. And the EBITDA margin has been 22.9, 25.9, and now 25.5. So that is the deal. It is basically a trampoline park with a few other things going on in it.
Wait, so how did these guys do okay during COVID? This doesn't make any sense at all.
Well, you don't know that. I mean, we don't see 2020 here.
2021, they had 13 million in revenue.
Yeah, I think 20 is not there. So 20 was probably the really bad year. And 21, they probably reopened. It's in the Midwest. I think it all depends on, where things were, whether they were more lax or more tight. And this probably is an area where parents were more than happy to get their kids in these places. Maybe a little bit of a post-COVID bump, I would imagine.
And the other thing it doesn't disclose here is this is a network. So this is a chain. They could have just opened a ton of new locations. So we don't have any visibility here on kind of revenue per location and how that's trended. That would be one of my primary questions. Their revenue is, it's up from 13.1 to 15.7. But if they doubled the number of locations, that's suddenly not so good anymore.
Right. And these are interesting because they're it's a location, it's a destination. You've got to go there to experience all this. Before we started recording, I mentioned that I'm working on a deal that is a bounce house business, and I really like that business. And it's kind of a funny story because I actually funded the current seller back in 2018 when he bought it. The seller that he bought from still works with me and is looking at other businesses to acquire. Wow. And I'm now in the middle of a transaction to another guy who, believe it or not, is a super sophisticated investment banker that's kind of stepping down from a career there to run a bounce house business. In fact, it was kind of hard. The bankers all kind of said, is he really going to run this? And he really is. So it's kind of a cool story. But I like that business because it's portable.
They rent bounce houses and take them to your house or to the park or whatever and set them up. Yeah.
Right. And community events and church events and all those kinds of things. And it's a different, the opportunities for growth when you are mobile like that are very different because, you store everything in a warehouse and you can just get a bigger warehouse and you can do some marketing and you can expand your geography, very cheaply, relatively speaking. This, to Bill's point, you got to add a whole new location. You have to do the CapEx to build one out. 4 is probably a pretty good level of scale for something like this. But there's probably going to be a top performing location and probably a little bit of an underperforming location somewhere in there.
It's interesting to think about the unit economics on these. Let's just assume averages. They're doing $3 or $4 million in revenue, plus or minus $750,000 in EBITDA. I am dying to know how much they spent on the recent renovations, and CapEx that's not going to be reflected in EBITDA, and how often you have to do that for these kind of things. I mean, laser tag, I guess doesn't go out of style. People have been doing that for decades, but how often do you have to, redo your whole system? Indoor climbing walls, video games, stuff like that.
Yeah. I have another anecdotal story on climbing walls. I looked at a deal where a group put in a very extensive indoor climbing, rock climbing gym, and they abandoned the whole project. Not only was it bad timing because it came online, in 2020, but they finally realized that they just couldn't have enough people on the wall at any given time. That they had a capacity problem. Basically, they couldn't. They hadn't really figured that out until they built it. And so climbing walls are, I understand, fairly inefficient use of space. So I imagine this is probably one simple little corner of this space. A big climbing wall facility can be, a tough way to try to make money.
But it's so cool, though, Heather. It's so cool.
I think that's what gets people into it because it's so cool. And they probably do it themselves. And it's kind of like my hobby. My hobby is horseback riding, but it's a great way to lose a lot of money is to try to be in the horse business. Or what do they say, to turn, 5 million into 2 million or whatever it is. A lot of people get into these kinds of things because they love it, but not because it's profitable.
Only place that makes sense to make it a business on your tax return, right? At least for 3 years until the IRS figures out it's a hobby business.
I have some friends that are in this business. They own one here in San Antonio. The COVID was horrible for them. Like I just think I still have PTSD from like taking them out to lunch and they're like, we don't know what's happening. We're not going to make it. Then the other thing that happens with these things that happened to them was your landlord, you have wholesale transfer problem, right? Your landlord immediately is trying to skim as much out of you as possible. And so in their case, they bought into like a franchise version of this. And then the franchisor turned out to be a totally illegal franchisor. It was really good, really good business story, but not good for them. And they ended up getting out of it, whatever. But like as part of all that, the landlord started to see how much money they were making, and it was just like massive extraction of all profits. They're like, the landlord is basically just creating it where it's just worth it for us to keep doing it, but we have no upside whatsoever. And actually, their landlord picked up all that right during COVID because they couldn't pay rent, right? They were paying a couple $100,000. I think it was like $70,000 to $80,000 a month in rent. And they obviously just couldn't keep doing that. So anyway, I don't mean to be really negative about this. I have another thought, but I'll try to save it for a few minutes from now.
What I've seen here in our area with these is that it's really good on the entry because some of these indoor trampoline kind of arcade type things, they'll go into like a vacant grocery store or like a Lowe's, or Home Depot or something that's closed, that's really hard to release. And they can get in at a really attractive price and maybe sign like a 3 or 5 year lease. It's not that expensive to upfit if you're just, putting in, they're big boxes and you're filling them with trampolines or laser tag. Like it's not like medical equipment or cold storage or something crazy expensive. But then when your lease comes back around, it's like, well, hey, now the building is cash flowing. It's much more desirable, and now you have all the sunk costs. So where are you going to go? And you're going to find another 50 to 100,000 square feet. That's the big issue is these are massive buildings. If you're going to do indoor go-karts, like you got to have a huge amount of space.
Yeah, it's got to be rural, right? Like, when I used to live in Denver, there was one like outside the city and it was awesome. Like they built out go-kart track and everything inside, but it was 2 stories. It was like this giant warehouse thing. And I don't know what, like if they left, it's sort of this like weird standoff situation because if they leave, the landlord's got to do a ton of work to make it not a go-kart track anymore or for anything else. But also if the tenant leaves, they've got to do another whole bunch of work to build a go-kart track somewhere else. So I'm not a real estate professional, but I don't know how these kind of mutual assured destruction situations get resolved.
Right. Or how do you sell it? Yeah.
There's been a lot of capital flowing into this space, at least me watching it here in Texas. There's a chain called Andretti's, and then there's Main Event, and there's like another one that have come in. And to me, like, look, I like that this is in a city like San Antonio, there's nothing to do outside for like 5 months of the year. It's just too hot. With your kids and you want to be active and have a good time. And if it's San Antonio, you also want to figure out how to eat, mozzarella sticks as often as possible. Like that is, this caters to that crowd for sure. We're not the healthiest city in the world, I'll just tell you. But this to me also has what I kind of call the Dutch Brothers problem, which is Like Dutch Brothers fundamentally is selling the same exact ingredients prepared with the same exact recipes as every single other kind of coffee chain. That's one of the things I learned in the coffee business. You go and you look, it's the same identical stuff. Everybody was selling the same thing. And, Crumble Cookies has this problem as well, like totally undifferentiated product when it comes down to it. McDonald's on the other end of the spectrum has a differentiated product, but all of these guys who run Main Event, Andretti's, these guys, somebody opens up right next door and they're offering the same exact stuff. They're all buying the same laser tag kits. They're all buying the same go-karts. It's not differentiated at all. And to me, that's, I think, the biggest risk as I look at this, because I'm watching where there used to be one of these near my house. There's 5 of them now, and they all are exactly the same. So that just would have to be into my mind. Not saying this is a bad business. It's just like, as I look at where this is going to go and where trying to skate towards the puck, like money is flowing into this space and you don't have much of a moat in terms of a differentiated product at all. It's totally undifferentiated.
I mean, that being said, question though, this is different than a Starbucks or like the CapEx to open a Starbucks. You can open it in a tiny space and everybody and their brother wants to open a Starbucks. Like if I want to build a go-kart track, it's kind of insane for me to open it next to an existing go-kart track, right? And just split the market with them unless I can be like drastically better. But that seems crazy when I could just go to another place not nearby them.
Yeah. I'm watching it with new build the movie theaters here in San Antonio. There's 3 companies that are all going hard at it. There's a local chain, which happens to be owned by a nonprofit. Like this really rich guy gave a $200 million business to the local nonprofit and expected them to run it well. It's a fascinating case study in philanthropy. So they're building, and then there's 2 other chains that are building the exact same movie theater plus entertainment complex. And like right down the street here, 10 miles away in the suburbs, there are 2 of them right next to each other within 100 yards. And like, I think to your point, Bill, sometimes it only takes one moron to ruin a market, one moron with a lot of money. And anyway, I'm trying to bring positive Girdley on Friday, but I'm just sharing some hard-earned lessons and all these things, having started a coffee chain and then watched Dutch Brothers show up and put $50 million into a market. You're like, oh, this isn't as much fun as I thought it was going to be.
So hang on, can we just go back to gave a $200 million operating business to a nonprofit?
Yeah, is that not interesting?
They didn't. So if you're a nonprofit and you receive, let's just get this on record, and you receive the gift of a $200 million operating business, the very first thing you do is you hire an investment banker and you sell it.
No.
I don't think you usually can. So like there was a big instance of this that just came up on our radar because this company is actually continued. There's a big company called Barnhart Crane and Rigging. They like have a massive rigging. Like if you have to move things that weigh thousands of tons from like a port inland, they develop these big rigs to move it across bridges. These 2 brothers own this business. I think in the mid to early 2000s, the business was doing like $250 million in revenue, and they donated the entire business to the National Christian Foundation. And I dug into this week. National Christian Foundation has received, I think it's like over 1,000 businesses where they donate. I think it's voting or non-voting. Like the family still has some operational control, but basically all the proceeds of the business are reinvested into the business or donated and given away. But when they donated the business, it was like a $250 million gift. It's a big, financial planning tool now that a lot of big endowments are using, but they can't sell it. That's the big thing, right? Because part of the planning for these folks is I'm giving this business so that it can remain very, very long-term focused instead of just, being folded into, the typical M&A process.
All right. Taking a quick pause here. I have something to tell you. This is Michael. I hate bookkeeping. I hate doing HR. I hate doing all that kind of stuff. But for bookkeeping, I have found a solution. It is my friend Charlie's business called cloudbookkeeping.com. So that's cloudbookkeeping.com. They are your perfect partner if you want to get bookkeeping out of your hair and focus on making your your customers happier and more successful. So please give them a call. Call Charlie, cloudbookkeeping.com. Tell them we sent you. They're a great way if you're a business buyer, if you're a business owner, you're tired of hassling with getting your bookkeeping done. He's got a whole fleet of people that are well-trained and work for him. He's located here in San Antonio, so I can tell you because of that, he's awesome. And they're a great partner for you to potentially call to help with all your bookkeeping needs so you can do the important stuff in your business rather than worry about getting your books right. So give Charlie a call, cloudbookkeeping.com. And now back to the episode.
But don't you, I mean, so it's the same thing as, donating appreciated public stock, right? You get the full value, you eliminate the capital gain. Like you get the full value as a tax deduction. And then usually the charity sells the appreciated public stock instantly. And then keeps the money. But the difference in this case is, the terms of the gift where that they have to keep running it. Yep. I think Michael's point, though, is, whoa, like not many nonprofits are going to handle this very well.
No.
Well, I have not studied it closely because it's kind of like when you're standing in front of a busy traffic intersection and you're like, oh, I know what's going to happen here. I'm kind of that kind of, spidey sense where I'm like, oh, I don't want to see what happens here. But I did see an article where like the whole estate was valued at like 350 million. And then like 18 months later, they're like, just kidding. It's really worth 150. We're totally joking now that we've got our head around the whole thing. So, but yeah, I think it's fundamentally, to your point, Bill, nonprofits are in the business of making donors feel good and doing what the donors want, and not in a great business of running a business. And it there's a reason the private sector wins a lot of that stuff. So look, it's called Santikos if you want to look it up. They're a local movie chain, really smart people.
One thing about these businesses that has been kind of interesting in terms of, professionalization is that they were obviously super mom and pop for a long time. And like the old, broken down go-kart track and, like the batting cages and all that kind of stuff. And it was very feast or famine. What I've seen a lot, because I'm totally the victim of this, is we had a new trampoline park open up in a grocery store. I have 4 kids. If it's raining, if it's too hot, which it is for, like you said, Michael, several months out of the year, you need some place to go to get your kids out of the house. This one, when it opened, they had like an introductory promotion. It was $10 per kid per month, and you could go every single day for 2 hours. Well, it costs like $15 just to go once. So we were like, oh yeah, heck yeah, we're going to sign up. I think I'm going to probably pay this thing until my kids are like 40. Like there's no way out of it. It's somehow, some way I'm locked down. But like the novelty is kind of worn off and my kids are getting a little bit older, so they don't really go as much, but getting people onto a subscription, right? Some kind of recurring revenue helped kind of balance some of this out. And then, people will host birthday parties. One of these places, they rent, I think they own them, Heather, but they bring in tons of bouncy houses. And in a corner of the whole facility, there's like, 20 different bounce houses. And it's like, that's a dream for, parents with young kids, is you just go let your kids, take off and play, and you're at least inside and it's somewhat kind of confined. What I don't think these have done that you have like, the Buffalo Wild Wings and Dave and Buster's and those, is that they're not really capturing food and drink and alcohol sales. They have not combined those, I think, at least at scale in our area. And it doesn't seem like they don't mention anything about that here. I think this is just a family fun center, not, an adult arcade.
My son sold those subscriptions. I'm sorry, I had to jump in and say that. This was one of his first jobs, was at a trampoline park nearby, and they sold the subscriptions and they got commissions. I mean, so like the kids that were selling it were all excited because they were making, decent money for their little job. And yeah, I agree with you. The primary driver of these businesses was selling those subscriptions. And then you're right, the parents have a tough time getting rid of them. And then I agree with Bill's point about competitive density. The one that's near us that my son used to work at, no one's come along and put one nearby. So, it's been there for a long time. It had a very tough time during COVID, but, I think it does sort of deter competition from coming in. They've got to get a big building and, it does have a fair amount of CapEx. So I think it becomes very location dependent, but I would be super curious to know what happened, how the lease has gone over the years and what that's done to the margin.
So here in San Antonio, and it is the center of the universe, as you guys know, but precisely what you're talking about, Mills, like there's a chain called Andretti's. It's licensed. They've licensed Mario Andretti's name. It is all of this crap. And then they have taken and put a giant bar and grill and sports bar attached to it. Mom and dad show up, mozzarella sticks and Bud Light. Kids go drop $50 on all this exact stuff. And like, that's how I would, evaluate this deal. Like Andretti's and those guys started in wherever they're coming from. They're hitting Texas, they're going to go to Florida, and then they're going to come to your state. And it's just getting prioritized. So I would totally just think about the long term, looking at this deal. Like, what is this going to look like 10 years from now? Am I going to get to a point where I have to have that bar and grill, or I'm not going to be competitive anymore? And I'm dumping $2, $3, $4 million in each one of these locations to build that out. Maybe I can't because I don't have the space. All of that is the stuff that, like, before I jumped into something like this, I'd want to see both the micro trend, like how many of these other things can sprout up within a mile of me, because they're coming. People want money. That's just how it works. But the macro trend of, okay, where are these in the grand scheme of what a modern version of this stuff looks like? And if you go to one of these Andretti's, like, it ain't tired. It's brand new. They dumped $15 million in this place, and they've got it down to a science to extract money out of parents who want mozzarella sticks and their kids to be entertained.
I want to go. Sounds great.
Come on down.
All right, let's bring it back to this deal here, the Indoor Family Entertainment and Recreation Center. So this business, 13 million of revenue, 3 million of EBITDA 2 years ago, 23% margin. This year, 2023, 15.7 million in revenue, 4 million of margin, 25.5% EBITDA margin. What do we think this is worth? I just have to say, I am so happy to look at a deal where the trajectory is normal. Like, this business has grown 7 and 13% in revenue year over year, and their EBITDA margin is functionally the same. It's expanded a little bit. It's gone from 23% to 25.5%. Like, this is normal as heck. We look at so many deals on this pod where the EBITDA margin, of course, in the most recent year, doubles, or, revenue is scaling absurdly. And this is just, in the beautiful way, a boring, stable business. I really like that.
And at the same time, I bet that this business does not have very much debt on it right now. I'm sure they have some debt on their balance sheet just from this recent CapEx. I don't think they funded it through operations. Looking at it right now, steady state, with its current capitalization, is a totally different thing to stomach and digest than thinking about running it with debt. If this business has $4 million of EBITDA, I would guess that on a normalized basis, after CapEx, you're probably pushing 3 million in EBITDA. And you're talking about probably at least $1 million, $1.5 million a year in debt service under any normal deal scenario. All of a sudden, it's starting to get thin.
Yeah, the CapEx and the opening new locations is the big thing that we don't see here, because it could take that 4 million of EBITDA down substantially.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of businesses that are great without debt that aren't so good at all with debt. And this one, absolutely, a lot of that EBITDA is going to be going towards interest, and the depreciation that they're adding back is going to be going towards CapEx. So does that, 4 million become 2 or less? It probably does.
But I mean, I've never owned a trampoline park. This could be one of those things where you install it and then it's fine 20 years later. It's not like the trampoline technology is changing that incredibly, right? So, if it's the type of thing where the stuff is not depreciating, or maybe, of course, depreciating, but it's not, you don't need to replace it a lot, or if you do, it's not expensive. This is a super financeable business, right, Heather? I mean, it's $4 million in EBITDA. It's stable. I mean, it's something you can understand. It's like a retail business. It has a lease. Like, this seems like something you could buy. I mean, it might be a little expensive for an SBA loan. We'll talk about it later, but you could buy this with debt for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You definitely could, especially because it's 4 locations. I think, that diversity kind of helps. And they've got a team that sort of knows how to open locations. So that makes it interesting to a lender as well. There's some way to kind of grow out of the debt. But yes, also probably too big for SBA because, the SBA limit of 5 million is there. And then you have a few lenders that will do this SBA plus pari passu, but that is kind of stops at about 8 million of debt. So this is really probably too big even for that.
This is definitely in Cleveland. Just got to tell you now.
You think so?
My money is that this is definitely Cleveland. So you got to discount it. You got to move to Cleveland.
You've been Googling this whole time?
No. Well, you just think about it. It's like, okay, where is the place you're probably going to get stuck when you own this business? And it's definitely Cleveland.
Don't you love that they say they're strategically located in the Midwest? they're just incidentally located in the Midwest. They didn't like these businesses are just there. They didn't like pick a map and go, "Hey, we're going to the Midwest. That's where we need to be."
Yeah.
But that's the beauty of a business broker. Once you hire a business broker, everything you've ever done is strategic and value add.
So many good adjectives there. Yeah.
Yep. This 4 million EBITDA is definitely too big for an SBA loan. Who buys this? Like, does this have to be a private equity deal? Like, how much does this sell for?
I think it's private equity, and I don't know what multiples, because this industry was wiped out during COVID, and it is now just 3 years post-COVID. And to Michael's point, a lot of this industry had a bad 20 and 21. Like my bounce house place, they basically had a terrible 20 and 21. Both years were identically bad, and finally bounced back. Oh, that was a good pun. In 22 and 23. I'm on a roll here. Awesome. And so, you've got this industry where you may only have right now 2 good years since COVID. So it is kind of an interesting industry to value. I'm not sure what the valuation is.
Bill, I like this actually for a family office. I think it's going to end up in a place where the debt's going to kind of be in a weird place where it's, it's too big for SBA. But somebody who can underwrite buying a business like this and being okay with there potentially being some headwinds in the future. And there's a couple of family offices that I've run into. They do basically their own captive search funder, programs where they buy businesses like this, and they're okay with injecting capital into stuff. They're okay with variable kind of returns. They partner with a young, professional to go buy a business like this. I think it's a $200 to $500 million family office that likes to kind of throw around $3 to $5 million in equity at a time. I could see them doing something like this with the right operating partner.
Also, people who like the real estate angle. There's a family office here in South Carolina that's made several plays in the garden center kind of niche, and it's because they really like the real estate associated with it, and the garden center is just kind of for fun in the meantime, but it's almost like a covered land play.
I think someone will buy this. Somebody looking for kind of stable yield to buy this. I also could see, depending on where it's geographically located, great bolt-on to something like Andretti's. If Andretti's wants to be in Cleveland, and I don't know if it's got to look a certain way to be an Andretti's. It's got to have certain, I don't know how intense they are on what it means to have an Andretti's experience, but I could see a similar chain coming in and saying, great, we're in Cleveland now, if this is in Cleveland, but a good geographic expansion.
Andretti's and Main Street here are typically standalone buildings. And it looked like, I haven't gone to look at it, but my suspicion is they went and bought their real estate and locked it up. They bought a big pad site, big 5-acre pad site, and built these big standalone. They're here, for example, they're right next door to our Topgolf, which is
that's exactly what I was going to say. It's just like Topgolf. We bid one recently for some roofing work, and there's one GC who's like, we've built, 39 of these. Like, we've done them all over the country, and we know the play. There's like the big one, the monster one. There's one that's like a little bit smaller, and then they have the format that's like indoor and it's all virtual. And like, they're like, we can build these like with our eyes closed.
That's a great general contractor business to get into. And I ran into a guy, Bill, we talked to that one guy who was at that event you and I went to, who basically is just like a captive real estate developer for Amazon distribution centers. And that's just all. He's like, yeah, they just call me and they tell me they're going to spend $200 million with me, cost plus, and this is how I do it. And they just tell me when they want it, and then we get it. So yeah, to Heather's point, you have some risk there with a single source of revenue. But man, the way up sounds like a lot of fun. I don't think you're creating a ton of enterprise value, but the guy was just like, yeah, I didn't know if I was going to have a good year. Now I'm going to make $5 million. It's like, okay, cool.
Yeah, he's like, my phone rings and $500 million or $5 million on the other end. Like, yeah. So he's like, so I always answer my phone. Unbelievable. All right. Well, this is a good one. Anyone else? Anything else to add?
I'm sorry to be so negative, guys. Like I want to like this one. You look at the numbers and it's good. And I'm just like, it feels like you're picking up nickels in front of a steamroller to some extent. So maybe the devil's in the details on this, and it's better than it smells, but there's just so many little mini red flags for me that just has me worried. So if anybody buys this, let me know how it works out. You can come on the podcast and tell me I'm an idiot. Like join our list of guests ready to come on and tell me I'm a moron. But just, man.
Well, we should just have one of those episodes where it's just everybody, like a string of people come on for like 60 seconds and tell us we're stupid.
Here's where
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
wrong.
Like,
4
long time
hours
listener,
later.
first time caller. Like, you guys said that thing about the bounce house park, and man, yeah, I was really dumb. Okay, thanks. Bye. Who's next? Next caller.
I have a fantasy of doing this as a lender for all the deals that got turned down that I know went well. Like that was like, I would love for have them like have the credit officer that said, because when the credit officers sometimes say no, they don't just say no, I don't want to do this one. They say this thing is terrible. It's doomed. And then, I follow up and I know the people in this turned out great. That's my fantasy, is that the credit officers all have to sit there and see all the people that they said were for sure going to fail and see that they did really well.
That is awesome.
I love that. We should do that too. We should have business buyers on and be like, I got turned down from all these loans and all of those underwriters behind the shadowy curtains, up yours.
Have to face it. Yeah. Have to face the success.
Well, I think that's where, a pattern where you see that happening. If you're doing something that is consensus right, there's a good chance it's priced pretty well. But if you're doing something that is consensus wrong, but it's right for one reason, or it's right for you for a special reason, that's where opportunity exists. So I hope I am wrong often, just because I want to see people succeed. And sometimes the way you're going to succeed is because I'm an idiot. So you're welcome, world. I'm here for you.
All right. We'll wrap that one up. Thanks for listening to this episode of Acquisitions Anonymous. We will see you next time.